So when you look in the Bible, and there's, of course, many great people that show up throughout the Bible story, starting with Moses, first bunch of books in the Bible, the story of his leadership of Israel, of Israel. And, of course, Joshua, the story of Joshua pops up and the great leader he was, and the lessons we can learn from him. And Caleb, the spy that wouldn't be broken and wouldn't tell a fearful story of the land that God had already promised to Israel. Of course, David shows up a bunch in the Bible, some good stories and some that probably he'd love to have a do-over on. Same thing with Solomon, another great leader in the Bible that had tremendous amount of wisdom. When he was asked by God, what is one thing that you'd like? He didn't ask for riches and all these great things that a king would want, power. He just asked for wisdom. And that in itself brought him the things that he could have asked for. Of course, with that came some pride and his downfall from that. And there's, of course, the disciples, John and Paul, and Saul of Tarsus. So many great leaders in the Bible. There's a story of Daniel and how he stood fast in the time during his captivity, and the prophecies that were brought to us through him that have shown us times of the end. But there's one that when you look in the Bible and you think of this person, he was just straight solid. He was a solid guy. And that's the story of Joseph. And Joseph, if you go back, a couple generations, of course, the story of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Esau, Jacob being Joseph's father, and the lessons that can be learned from that. And Joseph, we know that his dad had been working for Laban and wanted to marry one of Laban's daughters, Rachel. And you guys know the story. He ended up marrying his sister, got tricked into marrying him, worked a bunch more years, and was able to have Rachel as his wife, who was his favorite. And a great lesson there, you should just have one wife, right? Because then you don't have to have a favorite. And the trials and challenges that come from that. But Joseph, was born of Rachel. He was one of the last sons to be born of Jacob. And it was, as you read the story, it's not hard to figure out that Jacob was the favorite. And you could say that he was provided with a life of privilege in terms of he was given everything. And his dad liked him the best, so he got this and he got that, and the coat of many colors, we all know about that. And of course, our visual perception of that coat of many colors, if you've read the Uncle Arthur Bible stories, is that it's this striped coat. And it may or may not have been, but it was most likely some sort of a sign of royalty, as Abraham was a very wealthy person. And to be the heir apparent of, a mini empire, which is essentially what Abraham had, is quite something to be coveted, but also for his brothers to be very jealous of, as he was not the firstborn of Jacob, and typically those honors would have gone to somebody else. So it's a given that his brothers didn't really like him very much. And some of that, none of us lived through the story to know exactly how Joseph related to his brothers, but as we look at Joseph's life, we knew that he probably was not in the wrong in that failed relationship with his brothers. And so as Joseph was growing up and already had this heir apparency to the birthright or the leadership of the family, as back then, the size of your family dictated your future wealth and security from others that may not like you. They didn't have local police forces to take care of you. Your family size dictated whether you were able to continue as a family unit or not. And so it's a big responsibility to be a leader of that family. But then Joseph, when he's 17, approximately 17, he has this dream. And you guys know the dream. It's about the sheaves. And there's 12 sheaves, and 11 of them bow down to him. And for whatever reason, I don't understand that Joseph told his brothers this dream. Now, I don't think if I had 11 brothers and I knew they didn't like me, that I told them that I had a dream that they all bowed down to me, I don't think I would expect that to be received very favorably, to say the least. And then he also had the dream about the sun, moon, and stars, and they all leaned or bowed towards him. And he also told that to his family. And I thought it was interesting as I was reading the story of Joseph that his father didn't exactly appreciate at least one of these dreams either. In fact, it says in Genesis 37:10 that 37:10, so he told it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you?" It says, and his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So as the story goes on, his brothers were out tending the sheep, and the favored one was at home, not out in the fields. I'm not sure where Benjamin was in the story, but I'm pretty sure he was at home as well. And so Jacob wants to check on the brothers and see how they're doing. Obviously, they have all the livestock, and livestock is a measure of wealth back in those days. And so Joseph goes out in search of his brothers, and it was probably a little bit more than just running to Cortney and checking the family field. He had to go find them because they would kind of wander to where the eating was good, and as the animals were doing well, they would stay there and grow the animals. And if the grass was getting a little bit thin, then they would move to other places, and you had conflicts with other people who were also grazing their flocks. So you could really be anywhere in the region, and we're not talking about just the Jam Dam area, but a much wider region. And so Joseph went out, and he eventually found his brothers, and as I would expect, they weren't really that thrilled to see him. And we know the story. He eventually got thrown into the pit, and they wanted to kill him, but didn't quite have the heart to do that. So Judah, his brother, comes up with this great idea to sell him, make some money off the kid. And I thought it was kind of interesting as well that Joseph was sold for 20 pieces of silver by one of the 12 brothers. Who else was sold for 20 pieces of silver? Jesus was also sold by 20 pieces of silver by one of the 12, correct? I thought that was a pretty interesting analogy. And so Joseph goes from being, the pampered prince, and all of a sudden his world has been turned upside down into a way that he never would have planned that his life was going to go. And as we, in a moment, we'll explore where Joseph goes from this, I want you to tuck in your mind right now how Joseph handled not only the privilege or the good things in life he was given him, but when adversity faced Joseph, how did he handle that? Back in April, Jonnie and Cortney had their world turned upside down in a way that none of us would have planned. And I've asked them if they'd like to come up and share their testimony. As you guys have heard from the pulpit and from them, little tidbits of many things that, miracles that have happened in their journey, as well as some things that maybe haven't gone like we would have liked. But in any time when there's trials, we can always praise the Lord for the things that he has blessed us with. So you can sit over there, Cortney. You guys both have mics? Perfect. So we're just going to share this morning a little bit about their story and some things. And as I was talking to them this week, there are a lot of things that I learned. And as a church family, we have good times together and we have trials together, right? And we're thankful that we're able to go through this journey with you and support you. But Jonnie, let's just start out. It's back in April, right? April 6th?
April 6th. My life changed, obviously.
Yep.
It was just a normal day, felt like to me, but went over to work on my sister's house a little bit, and then I was like, I'll go for a little dirt bike ride. I had just fixed up my dirt bike this last winter, and it's like, time to take it out. All the snow was gone. And went over to Tim and asked him if he wanted to go for a ride as well, and so we went for a little ride on my parents' land. Just putzing around, not doing anything too crazy, and we were going over a few bumps, and bike came out from underneath my feet, and landed right on my butt and my tailbone, and instant pain. My legs were numb, couldn't feel anything. After it had subsided a little bit and I was laying there, I was talking with Tim, and after we called the 911 and everything, I'm like, Tim, I can't feel my legs. Like, there's nothing there. They're just numb. He's like, that's when he said, well, we'll get through it, we're going to get you to the hospital and we'll go from there and we'll get it all figured out. Like, you really helped me through that. Like, I'm glad that someone was with me, riding with me, because if no one was there, I don't know what I would have done, I'm very thankful for Tim that he decided to go with me for a ride that day, so.
So then that was the 6th of April, right?
April, yeah.
And so Tim called 911, and obviously you got a helicopter ride. Cortney, when did you kind of find out about this, and what were your thoughts right away?
I was actually feeding calves, and my
Your
phone
favorite,
was in
one
the
of
house.
your favorite things to do, right?
And Hannah had called Cole because she couldn't get a hold of me. So I found out through Hannah on the phone, and then Brandy got me and took me to the fire hall.
And so they had called a helicopter right away to come, and they met you at the fire hall.
That's the first helicopter ride, It's a positive helicopter ride.
Okay. So you were then flown up to Marquette, and it worked. And I worked in the healthcare, and sometimes things go really quick in emergencies, and sometimes there's a lot of fumbling. But I would say that it worked. Things lined up pretty well for you to get up there about as fast as possible.
Yes, very fast. And when I landed, I was up in Marquette. They brought me right in right away. I was in a room with 20 people doing stuff on me, taking care of me. There was one guy that actually was just up by the head of me, just talking to me. That was like his job, was just sitting there to talk to me and keep me distracted. Brought in, they did some CT scans, and then MRI. I was in the MRI for like an hour and a half. Probably fell asleep in there. And then brought out of MRI. I didn't know what was wrong with me at all until I went into surgery. That's when the doctor had, when we were walking into the surgery room, said, that you have a burst T12, and it's shattered in there, and there's some bones pushing on your spinal cord. And that's when I'm it hit me. I'm like, whoa, this it's major. It's really bad. So then, next thing I knew, I woke up from surgery, and that's when I had Cortney and everybody else come and talk to me, and they said the surgery went well. So
how long was it then from when the accident happened until you were in surgery? Do you know, Cortney? Do you know?
I think it was a little over 4 hours, 4.5 hours, from the time of the incident until surgery.
Yeah, and that's pretty incredible because, for this accident to happen a couple hours from a hospital, obviously got the helicopter flight, but then to be able to get the CT and MRI and in surgery right quick, that was a tremendous blessing. So, we're going to move through this first part fairly quick, but obviously, you woke up from surgery. That was Sunday night, Monday morning, and just what was going through your mind there in the next couple days?
Next couple of days were, not much sleep, but I was, scared. I was like, what's this going to change in my life? And then I started to have some movement the first couple of days afterwards, and it progressed a little bit. Then kind of by the 5th day, it disappeared. I had nothing. I had no movement. Before I could move my legs up a little bit and I could shake them, but then it disappeared and I got really scared. What's going to happen now? Is this going to be it? But in the back of my mind, I'm like, nope, God's going to heal me and I'm going to be able to walk. He can do such miraculous things that, it's going to be fine.
And Cortney, that first week in the hospital, I know you were there. I think you went up, and I don't think you came home for how long? Pretty much a week. Yeah. So, you go from milking cows basically to living in a hospital setting. Neither of you guys are healthcare workers. What was it like being in a hospital for so long? Cortney?
Well, getting there was scary because you don't know what's happening. But then as we just basically lived in the hospital, you got used to everything, but it was still the unknown. You don't know what you're looking ahead
to. A lot
to.
of change in life happening that you had no control over, right? So you were in Marquette for how long, Jonnie?
I was in Marquette for about 2 weeks. I was in the ICU for about a week, and then I got changed to just a med surge room where I was waiting on airplane to take me down to where I was going and all that kind of stuff.
And the plan for you to go was to go down to where?
Mary Free Bed Rehabilitation in Grand Rapids. Very, very well-known place and very good.
Okay. Yeah, Mary Free Bed is one of the top rehab hospitals in the region for sure. So as we've gone through about 2 weeks now, and you still have no feeling or movement in your leg, except for what had progressed the first couple days. What was when you went down to Mary Free Bed, what was your number one goal for being there?
My number one goal to start was to walk, like just to start therapy, start moving and getting my legs working again and to walk.
And so when you first, obviously you got there and they went through their assessments and see where you're at. What did they start working on like your first week? Because you got there, I think, on a Friday, is that correct?
Yes. So for Friday, they did some assessments. And Saturday, they had me start doing some therapy, just arm strength since I was very, very weak. I mean, I only could lift like 5 pounds when I first got there. So they just wanted me to start with some arm strength stuff and some just getting my upper body strong again.
Was your back hurting at this point still?
Yeah, it still had some pain. A lot of the pain medications had like worn off, and I could actually start feeling like the metal in my back, I would say. And at night it would sometimes keep me up, but they did have some medications that I could take to help dull the pain.
Okay. And so, your goal was obviously when you go there, like, well, I'm going to go to Mary Free Bed, top hospital. We're going to be walking again pretty soon, right? When did you recognize that, at least in your journey, how it is right now, that your focus was not on walking, but on living with an injury?
About 2 or 3 weeks in, I wasn't really noticing any progression. Like it was still like nothing. Like I just had, I still have it to this day. It's like this numbness and tingling in my legs. Like it would never go away. Some people say it's good. Some people just say it's nerve pain. That just is there and you'll have it forever or it'll go away. But yeah, it was about 2 to 3 weeks in, I kind of hit me like, this may be it. I may be in a wheelchair forever. Like, this may be my life. So it hit me really hard, and it was tough sleeping, or it'd keep me up at night. I mean, I'd sit there and cry myself to sleep. It'd be very tough because, this is not me. I'm always the guy that's always running around and doing stuff and excited. But I was like, God's got a plan for me. I don't know what it is, but He wants me, he's got a plan.
Exactly. And Cortney, so, we've been down there a few weeks now. Of course, you tell us about how things worked out for you to be able to be down there, because normally, when in Marquette you had the Beacon House you stayed at, correct, which is I'll call it a building, whatever. It's a service that the hospital there has provided for a long time. When I worked there, they had it as well. It was in a different place because it was the old hospital. But it's very inexpensive rooms that you can stay in while a family member, loved one, is in the hospital. So going down to Grand Rapids, I don't think Mary Free Bed probably provides that service. So it just so happened that.
So we both have family down in Grand Rapids. So I lived with my dad's cousins for that first month while Jonnie was an inpatient, and it was about 20 minutes from Mary Free Bed. So I'd drive there every morning, spend the day with him, and go to therapy with them, and then drive back to their house at night.
So how much of his therapy were you involved in? Were you just kind of sitting back in a kickback chair watching?
Oh, no. I was there every day, went to every session, and I got like the honorary PT, they said, because I pushed him more than they pushed him.
That's what a good wife is for, right? So you would travel back and forth from your relative's house, and that was a blessing because you didn't have to rent a hotel room or find an Airbnb or some kind of apartment while you're down there. And not only that, but you had the support of family members. Yes. They're close by, so that's a blessing. So, moving on, working through rehab, the focus of your rehab was on doing what you're doing today, right? Coming to church, getting dressed, in and out of vehicles, all those types of things, right? Did you begin to enjoy that at all, or was it always like this is something that I have to do just to be able to get around for now?
Yeah, I did enjoy it a little bit, but it was tough to like wrap my mind around it. Like everything is going to be a little more tougher now. Like, I think about, now doing this is going to be a little more tougher, but I would be like, no, this is going to be what I have to do now to get around, and I still want to get around. And like, there's so much adaptive equipment that I was looking at. Like my first couple weeks, I was like, there's these golf carts. So I started emailing these people about these golf carts and how I get one and how I can get out and start doing stuff again. And I was seeing videos of people riding dirt bikes still. And, I was getting more like, okay, if this is how it's going to be, I'm going to enjoy it. Like, this is what I'm going to start looking at so I can get out and do things and get back out there again.
Perfect. And, with your injury, just to share with everybody, there's different types of spinal cord injuries. Some are complete injuries, which you basically have pretty much can count on no recovery, right? Like that's completely broken. But yours is more, I'm going to call it like a compression or from those bone fragments. With a burst fracture, you have a compression fracture of your vertebrae, and the kind of pieces break off, and the pieces that broke off kind of went in and kind of put pressure and trauma to the cord, but it's still intact in terms of it wasn't severed. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's from what I know from what the surgeon has told me, is that it's still all intact and there.
So, with that being said, with people with your injury, even though you have no feeling movement right now, it is still a possibility, right?
They said it is still a possibility. They said it may not be everything back to normal, but you still have the chance of having feeling and maybe a little movement where you can get up, but it won't return to normal most likely because it's been so long.
Been traumatized. Okay. So then after you were there for a month or 6 weeks, then you moved to outpatient. What was that experience like? So when you were inpatient, you were in basically a small hospital room, right? Had the call light, the buzz button.
Had a nurse whenever I wanted, right there.
Can get some food or a drink or help with something. But eventually you got to transition past that, right? And so we go from getting full service to now just some assistance, right? And therapy.
So yeah, it's just therapy then. I was very nervous and scared, but yet a little bit excited at the same time to get out of inpatient because I don't have a nurse or I don't have a doctor right there where I can, like, if I need something or I have a question or anything like that. But yet I was excited to get out and like start the next chapter, start focusing on like, okay, our own life, mine and Cortney's life together, and just figuring that out. And then so we got out of inpatient and we moved into it was a hotel room basically, so just very small. But it was nice because it was attached right to the rehabilitation center, so I could just wheel right over into rehab without even going outside at all. It was all right connected, so right there. So if I really did need something, there's doctors and there are nurses there that are able to assist you in a little bit.
And so, Cortney, tell me about, you were living with your relatives and, we moved from inpatient to outpatient or whatever you call it, whatever they term it. What were your feelings that first night that Jonnie didn't have the call light? Cortney was the call light.
I was the call light.
Courtney call light.
It was a little nerve-wracking because I didn't know really what went on at night because I spent 2 nights there.
Yeah.
But it was all on me then. So I'm like, I don't know what to do. And then Jonnie would be like, well, you have to do this, walk me through it. But yeah, it was different. Definitely took a lot of adjusting. But we got that adjusted and we got.
Did you feel like you had to just step it? You just had to go for it? Like you weren't really sure what it was. You're like, well, here we go, right?
If I drop him, I drop him.
Yeah. And he's twice as big as you, so it's hard to get him back up, right? But you had learned these skills in rehab.
Right.
Like if you were end up on the floor, you learn how you would get back up, right?
Yeah.
It seems maybe simple, but it's really not that simple. There's a lot of technique and position to get in. So tell me about that first day, because when you moved to outpatient rehab, there wasn't space for you, like the therapy department in outpatient. They didn't have an opening, or their schedule didn't allow for you to start therapy for, was it a week?
Yeah, so we got out on Wednesday, so we moved into the inn that day.
Yep.
We basically just, because we didn't get out of inpatient till like a little afternoon. So we spent the day unpacking and making it like our home. And then the next day, I said, all right, let's go. So we went out, we went to Walmart, we went to another
Walmart,
little
the first store you go to, right?
And then we went and visited some family down there, so it was a lot of in and out car transfers for Jonnie, and just figuring out how to get a wheelchair into the car, how to put it together, and all of that. It was a big day.
I would have liked to have been watching that from afar. Good for you. So that first day was like you got out of jail, right? It's like a jailbreak. So you were then an outpatient for how long?
About 5 weeks, I would say, 4 to 5 weeks.
And how much therapy did you have during that time?
It was 4 days a week for 45 minutes of physical therapy and then 45 minutes of occupational therapy.
Okay, so you guys were your own schedule throughout the day. And then obviously, I know when you came home because it was 2 days before Michaela's wedding, so it was July 11.
Yes.
I'll always probably be one of the only ones to remember the day you came home because it's easy for me to count back too from my daughter's anniversary. But just in a couple minutes here, how have you adjusted to life? And I know housing was a big concern for coming home, right? Because the house you're living at the farm was not wheelchair accessible and would have needed some modifications. So I know there was discussions that went on and on. I shouldn't say on and on, but as you were like progressing through therapy, what was going to be needed. Of course, everybody in this church, that would ask would be stepped up to do whatever needed to be done to that house. But we know now that you're not living there. So what happened with that?
Well, so we were sitting there talking. I think it was with Russell and Colleen at night one time.
When was this about?
We were in outpatient. I'd say it'd be 3 weeks before we came home, something like that.
Okay.
But it was sometime, yeah, when we were outpatient for sure. Sitting there talking and all the stuff that needed to be done with the house, and it was going to be a lot, and like just it was narrow in the house too, like the hallways, just getting in and out of things. We were talking, and then he said, "Well, talked with Eileen, and she said, hey, would they consider switching houses?" And I was like, whoa. To me personally, I was like, inside, I was like, oh, that's great. I was like, I don't want to take her house. But I was thinking about it more. I'm like, it's a lot of work for the house. And like her house is all one floor. Like I can get in and out of it, no problem.
From the garage into the house.
Garage right into the house. I can get into the bathroom a lot easier. I can do my whole, it'd be just a whole lot easier for me. And now that I see it and I'm here and I'm home, I'm very, very thankful for that because it makes it a lot easier for me and for Cortney just to get around and do things and get out and about.
Perfect. So then you came home, you moved into their house, and it's probably been happily ever after, right?
Yeah, it's been a little rough, getting used to things at home too here. I mean, it's not as easy, but we are getting through it, and I'm getting out and getting about. We went out to the off-road races. I'm still getting out and doing things. So.
And I can tell you, I appreciate. It was the very first Sabbath you're home, and Jonnie and Cortney aren't sitting home feeling bad for themselves. They're here, come rolling in. I know I was super excited to see you. You were here the first Sabbath, right? Yeah. And I remember they rolled in, and I thought, here they are, just got back in a big adjustment, and here before Sabbath school starts. That was awesome. So anything else either of you would like to share? Thanks to anybody in particular, or people, or just anything else about like your plans over the next few months?
I just want to thank the whole church family in general. I mean, all the cards and all the text messages, all the phone calls, and all the help that you've helped with that we haven't seen behind the scenes. I just want to thank everybody. I mean, you have all been a blessing to us, me and Cortney both. It has been on how much you've helped us. I just want to thank you. I mean, it's very much of a blessing.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing and opening up, letting us into your life and the things you've been going through. It is our sincere prayer that your rehab and possibly some motion in your legs or even walking, we know that's still a possibility. And I know there's many people that are praying for you guys. I'd like to ask us as a church to not forget about them in your prayers And, oftentimes when a traumatic experience happens, there's a huge outpouring of support and, checking in everything. And then as life goes on, those of us that have been through trials and everything, you kind of left by yourself. And we don't want that to be the case for you guys at all, whatever needs you have. But also to bring awareness to each of us of those that are around us, the needs that they have, and ways that we can very easily help out and make a difference in their life. So thank you guys so much for sharing that with us and telling your story and opening up with us. So going back to the story of Joseph, I left off when Joseph had been sold as a slave for 20 pieces of silver. And this is obviously a part of something that he never would have imagined. But what are some of the things about Joseph in the next handful of years that really impressed you? I can tell you some of the things that impressed me is that Joseph, no matter what happened to him, he was stripped from his family, his livelihood, future fortune, everything else that you would have wanted. And regardless of the circumstances that happened in his life, he fully surrendered himself to God. That's probably one of the most important things during trials and crisis in our life is to continue to surrender ourselves to God. And he knew that God had a plan for his life. He'd had this dream, and I truly believe that he believed that God had a plan for him and that these dreams were not just something that happened. And it says in Patriarchs and Prophets, his soul thrilled with high resolve to prove himself true to God under all circumstances, to act as became a subject of the King of Heaven. He would serve the Lord with undivided heart. He would meet with trials, his lot, with fortitude and perform every duty with fidelity. One day's experience had been the turning point in Joseph's life. Its terrible calamity had transformed him from a petted child to a man, thoughtful, courageous, and self-possessed. And it could be easily said that Joseph was just handed everything in life as well, right? His father was fairly wealthy, quite wealthy, maybe probably one of the most wealthy people in the region, and he was the heir apparent. And if we just read the story casually, think, oh, he just goes and, Potiphar knows that he's got a lot of potential and just hands over the house to him. Well, that's not really the case, because the story in Potiphar's house, if you read the story, spans roughly 10 years. And Joseph very likely came into the house as the servant of servants. In other words, he came in at the very bottom, and he always did everything the right way. And he worked hard, and he was trustworthy. And working up to the top of Potiphar's house didn't necessarily happen in 1 year or 6 months or a few years. This is a 10-year process. 10 to 11 years he spent in Potiphar's house. In my life, that goes back to when I went to nursing school in 2014. And a lot of life has happened during that time. That's the amount of time that Joseph spent in Potiphar's house, grinding and doing the things that were right. And obviously we know that he was promoted to head of his household. Potiphar was one of the most influential people in the region in Egypt, next to Pharaoh. He was a pretty wealthy guy, and he had a lot. He had a lot of business ventures and fields and crops. And Joseph clearly, learned the Egyptian way of thinking. He learned the language and became in charge of everything that Potiphar had. In fact, Potiphar says that there's nothing that happens in this household that Joseph doesn't know. And likely many things that happened that Potiphar didn't even know about because Joseph just took care of it. But we know the story about Potiphar's wife. Without going into detail, Joseph got wrongfully thrown in prison, and once again, for the second time, he's starting over from scratch. Joseph finds himself in prison, and of course, it wasn't long till he was in charge of everybody in prison. So he takes this other challenge in his life and makes good of it. And then there's a story of the baker and the butler that had been thrown into prison, and Joseph, they had a dream and they were troubled by it, and Joseph listened to the dream, and God gave him the interpretation, and it came to pass. But one thing Joseph told him, it says, is when you go back to the king, remember me. He said that to the butler. Remember me when you go back to the king. Well, the butler got his job back with the king, forgot about Joseph, until 2 years later when the king or the Pharaoh had his dreams, and the butler remembered Joseph and said, there's a man in prison who has the ability through his God to interpret dreams. And we know the story from there that Joseph was eventually promoted to second in command of the whole land of Egypt. Egypt was the most powerful kingdom during that time. And Joseph went from being a slave, being thrown in prison, and each time, through his faithfulness, worked himself up. You know, in the story of Potiphar and how Joseph was treated, I believe that Potiphar knew that Joseph wasn't guilty, because Potiphar could have had him killed if that was the case. If he truly believed that he had been messing with his wife, he wouldn't have lived. And likely the Pharaoh talked to Potiphar before with his promotion, and Pharaoh probably had found out what had happened to him, and he had been thrown in prison, yet he still worked hard and trusted in God and did things the right way. And so I'd like to challenge each of us in the trials and challenges that we face. And they come at different times in life. Jonnie and Cortney have shared the trial they have, and I see them out grinding. I see them here at church every week. I love watching you guys come in. It makes me so happy, because many people could just take the path that, well, it's just too hard. It's too hard to get out and go to church, or it's hard to be on time. And we have challenges in life through losses of jobs, family members, challenging children, parents that disown us, many, many challenges that we face in our life. And when we look at the story of Joseph, very few of them compare to what he went through, being sold into a foreign country when you're the only one left. And the way Joseph kept himself aligned with God. And so that's what I would like my challenge for each of us to be, is that as we face challenges in our life, when things aren't going our way, when someone says something that hurts our feelings, or when we don't get a promotion we deserve, or we lose a job that we should have, or budget cutbacks cut a program that we're lined up to receive benefits from, there's many challenges we have in life. But I would like to encourage each of us to think about stories like the story of Joseph, and how we can not only accept challenges and trials in our life, but embrace them and allow God to be the leader of our life through those challenges, so that we can achieve the potential that God has planned for each of us. We don't know what that is. Joseph, from the time he was sold till he became second in command of Egypt was 13 years. Think about where you were 13 years ago. And he continued to grind and stay focused on God for that whole time before he was truly, truly blessed. And through that blessing, he was able to save his family, and obviously the story of Israel and a nation that continues through today may not have happened if it wasn't for Joseph. So let's close with our closing song, Grace, number 213. Jesus is coming again. That's the whole purpose of continuing forward, is to be ready for that time when Jesus comes again. If you'd like to do a little further learning on the life of Joseph, there's an amazing sermon that Dana introduced me to this week, that Doug Batcher just talks about the life of Joseph and the parallels to our life and the things that we can do to be a little more like Joseph. So Paul will be putting a QR code on the screen. You can take a picture of that. Otherwise, you can look at the live stream, the relook of the sermon, and there's a footnote there as well with a link to that. So let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for the life of Joseph, and also for the testimony that Jonnie and Cortney have shared with us today. And Lord, I pray that as we each have challenges in our lives that come in many different ways and many different forms at different times in our lives, that we will continue to push forward with your guidance and understand that you have a plan for our life that may not be that we may not understand today, but that in our life we will understand. And help us to be patient and wait for that, but also continue working to be closer to you. In your name we pray. Amen.